Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of That Early Childhood Nerd. I'm Heather Bernt-Santy. On this episode, I have Carol Garboden Murray. Hi, Carol.
Hi.
It feels like we haven't seen each other or talked to each other in a long time.
I know we thought we would have a little time,
Yeah, I guess
all of our extra time.
we've been texting about planning this, but we haven't really interacted much other than that. So it's nice to see you.
You too.
So we're going to talk today about romanticizing childhood and children, which is something that uh, it moves in and out of my mind, and I haven't been ever really quite sure how to articulate my discomfort. So when you suggested it as a topic, I was like, yes, absolutely. Carol's the one to help me talk through what I'm thinking about this. But I'm going to go ahead and start with this quote that you sent, and let you talk a little bit, and then we'll just go from there. So this is from Sylvia Ashton Warner. And she writes, I suppose they still give them books about the birds and the trees and the breeze and all of that, thinking that by giving them peaceful books, they will make the children peaceful. But what they're doing is fragmenting them further, disintegrating them. The thing to do is to give them bad books like themselves. Then you'll integrate them, and then you can get them peaceful.
Yes.
What's that supposed to mean?
I love it. When I read that, it reminded me when I was a toddler teacher. We
Uh-huh.
had this book that was by Barbara Lindgren. I don't think they're in print anymore.
Uh-huh.
And it was called Sam's Car. And so Sam has a car, and then I can't remember who, Lucy comes along and takes his car.
Uh-huh.
Sam hits Lucy. Lucy cries. Sam cries. Mommy comes and she says, "Hey, I have two cars." So it's like this very simple toddler book. It was so
Hmm.
popular.
Oh,
And
okay.
my assistant teachers kept like hiding it because they just said, "This is horrible. This book shows a child hitting a child." And, and it wasn't from our country. I think it was from
Yeah.
Australia. Barbara Lindgren. Do you know that
Okay.
author?
I don't know.
They're really beautiful books.
Uh-huh.
Um, but I think it's out of print. But
Yeah.
I thought that's what it made me think of. I remember like how much the kids love that book and how relevant it was to them developing their social skills.
Hmm.
But it showed that image of Sam hitting Lucy, and they were both crying, and it made the adults in my room so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So this idea that um, children should be kind and good and loving,
Hmm.
and that perhaps if we just surround them with flowers and trees and nice images, they
Yeah.
will just be kind and good and loving. And that if we do put books in their hands, the book should be about lovely things, right?
Hmm.
And that was
Yeah.
just such a simple book. And it was interesting how much the kids loved that book and how unromantic it was.
Uh-huh.
Child hitting another child. It
Right.
wasn't lovely. It
Just
was so real
real
though, right?
life.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Which is, I suppose, the appeal for the children,
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
that um relatability, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
I suppose the teachers also might have been afraid that it was going to give some child the idea to hit, there's
Right.
always that too.
Right. Right.
Well, I just um it sort of reminded me as I was reading through what you sent me, uh among other things, of this idea that we get into the work because we just love children.
Mhm.
And how many times I've interviewed somebody to work with young children, and you ask that question, why do you want this job or whatever? And their answer is always, well, I just love children. And
Yeah.
I started to push back on that and say, what about children who bite?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
what about children who, constantly have a crusty booger nose?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and you could see the change in how
Hmm.
their own sort of disequilibrium of, oh yeah, how do I love those kinds of children? And that's not what I'm here for. I'm here for the hugs, and
Hmm.
it just makes you feel so good when you're with them.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and that takes away their humanity in
Yeah.
a sort of kinder way than a lot of the other ways we take away their humanity in our practice, at least superficially kind. Um, But it's this assumption that they're not fully human when we
Yeah.
romanticize the idea of childhood.
Yeah, that romantic notion, yeah, it's so true. Like I was thinking the same thing. And I think I told you I've been trying to write about
Yeah.
romanticism and love, and I wanted to reject romanticism altogether. Like I read this book called The AntiRomantic Child
Uh-huh.
by Priscilla Gilman, I think. Priscilla Gilman. Anyway, she was an amazing author, but she was like a scholar, a poet. She studied poetry, and especially the Romantic era. So she had
Mhm.
these idealized views of her own childhood, looking back on how happy her childhood and the kind of mom she would be.
Mhm.
And then she was born with this child, and she just so eloquently described, like, I feel anything but romantic. It's like this idealized image about becoming a parent,
Uh-huh.
and her son was not cuddly, and her son
Mhm.
was kind of not chubby like a cherub. He was scrawny, and he had elbows that were always poking her, and it
Mhm.
wasn't easy to breastfeed. And so she was like talking about this notion of the anti-romantic child, and I
Mhm.
and I thought, yeah, that's what I want to say. I want to
Yeah.
say the love that we have for children isn't romantic. It's not in that romanticism kind of
Mhm.
philosophy. It's hard, it's strong, it's deep, it's understands,
Mhm.
the challenges, the commitment, and all that
Yeah.
that it takes. But then I kind of, as I was writing about it, I thought, well, it is romantic too, because
Yeah.
because we do love children. Like you said, we say we love children, and we don't
Mhm.
even know what we're saying when we start out. Like, what is
Right.
love? And so romanticism, I think we get angry as early childhood educators. We see the children running in the field of daisies, and isn't it sweet, and isn't it lovely, and
Yeah.
everything you do is so beautiful, and you're singing songs and all that stuff. And we're like, no, 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 no. It's so much more than that, right?
Right.
It's
It's
so,
one of the reasons that when you tell somebody that you work with young children, especially, that birth to five age group, one of the standard reactions is, "Aw,
yeah, they're so cute.
that must
So
be precious."
but we want to reject that. We want to say,
Mhm.
no, we take children
Right.
seriously. And this is hard work, and it
Yeah.
requires intellectual rigor, and we have to make really important decisions all days. But then as I was writing all that, I was kind of kept falling back into romanticism. Like,
Yeah.
you know, I have to admit that I still get goosebumps when I
Hmm.
work with kids, because I feel like they are so profound, or
Hmm.
I get that sense of like, I'm so lucky to spend my day with these children. Or I sometimes look up and it does look bucolic, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
It's on the playground on a spring day. And so maybe romanticism is just that first step, like our love for humanity, right? Our love for children,
Yeah. Do
but
you
it is
think it's
sort of innocent.
connected? Yeah. Do you think it's connected to um, that sort of evolutionary give and take that the child sort of has the babies who are uh I guess less difficult to connect with. Um I don't know how I want where I was going with that, but this idea that um the baby's helplessness engages us and that's for their survival.
Right.
It's not this cosmic connection, even though I think both things could be true, but there's that
Mhm.
that idea that they're so dependent on us for their survival and so vulnerable, just because they're smaller, less experienced, less developed, all those things. Um, so that romanticism sort of contributes to the survival,
Keeps us
keeps us
alive, right?
connected.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the part where you have that push and pull. Like, is care natural?
Yeah.
Yes. Is love natural? Yes. And
Hmm.
I was even reading like Maria Montessori's works. She has a whole chapter on love in one of her books of lectures, like Absorbent Mind or something like
Hmm.
that. And she's saying that very thing. She's sort of comparing children to mammals. You like this, it's natural.
Hmm.
Love, she says, actually, love is not learned, love is natural.
Hmm.
So that sort of fits in this, like the romantic era, the
Yeah.
romantic uh, philosophy going back to Froebel, and before that, Pestalozzi. Is,
Hmm.
this children, we see them as almost like divine, almost
Right.
a gift from God. And so that connects to this like natural element. Of course, as humans, you're right. It's
Mhm.
evolutionary. We have to think kids are cute. That's how we stay alive. They have to be cute.
Right.
But I would just like, then I read that of her saying that we don't learn to love, that love is natural. And I wanted
Mhm.
to challenge that, right?
Right.
That's the place where I wanted to say, well, okay, this is where we have to grow. When
Mhm.
we're talking about love in our profession, we have to say, well, it would be nice if everyone experienced love, a
Right.
loving childhood, but there's a lot of confusion about what love is.
Mhm.
So maybe care is more natural. Maybe
Maybe
that's
so.
what, maybe care is more natural because we have to care for our children.
Mhm.
And that's what Bell Hooks would say, like, care is not love. Don't
Mhm.
conflate care and love. I can live in a home where my mom feeds me, dresses me, keeps me clean and dry, and still be really confused about what love is,
Mhm.
because maybe my parents are punitive, maybe they're spanking, maybe
Yeah.
they're abusive, maybe they're neglectful. So as children, we get really confused about the notion of love.
Sure. Especially when someone is saying, I do this because I love you. You know what I
Yes,
mean?
yes.
That's where we get into kind of a toxicity of talking about love without having thought deeply about it or considered it
Mhm,
or
mhm.
really unpacked it for ourselves. Like, what does it mean when I say I love children or anybody? You know, what does that really mean when I say I love somebody?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I think like I also wanted to reject it because I think in our country we have such a marketing
Yes.
mentality, right? So and I'm not saying anything against Montessori education or Waldorf education, but there's those images of that romantic era.
Hmm.
And so even though Pestalozzi and Montessori, they were all about helping the disabled child and
Hmm.
the child in poverty, when it's come here to our country, because of the way things are set up, with commercialism and capitalism, there's this marketing element
Hmm.
where it's okay, again, the child in the field of daisies and
Hmm.
the child holding a wicker basket and caring for the animals on the farm. And it's all
Hmm.
so beautiful. And it is, kids, it is
Yeah.
beautiful. It is bucolic. I love seeing kids in nature. I love seeing kids with animals, but it doesn't tell the whole story of the whole child.
Right.
Then there's this piece of society that doesn't understand the whole child, and so that when your toddler is having a temper tantrum in the grocery store, people are scolding you,
Yeah.
or thinking that there's something wrong or there's something bad and it's not lovely anymore.
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean,
I
I
I
was getting my
think
nails done and there were these two little girls there, and this sweet little elderly woman kept saying, "You're such good girls, you're such good
yeah.
girls." And I was like, what does it mean to be a good girl, you know?
Yes.
They're being
Yeah.
quiet.
They're being quiet and compliant. Yeah, absolutely. I,
So
I think, and I've said this before, but I don't think I've thought about it for a while, is the the cute is good because it can hook us, it can get our attention, but to really be and do what the children need from us requires that we go beyond just the, oh, that's so cute,
mhm.
and really think about, I think one of the things I feel like I'm hearing you say is that um when you talk about the reverence that you have for childhood, it's because you understand like the developmental realities and the humanity, and even when things are messy, you can still hold that child in that space of understanding what might be happening, if that makes sense. So it's maybe that's what it means to love or care about children, is to be able to be willing to go deeper and try to really understand what's happening. Because I think one of the dangers of this sort of romanticized version of a child is that then when there's anything that we would call misbehavior, we come down heavier on the child. That,
Yes,
there must be something wrong with you,
yes,
child,
yes,
because children are lovely and beautiful and angelic, and you are not.
yes,
Instead of giving them that gift of understanding or looking at ourselves or the environment in those situations, I feel like that can really be a barrier to the children who need that love the most,
yes. I
or
think that,
or that
yeah,
intention. Yeah.
I love thinking about that, like the romantics, like, Pestalozzi and
Mhm.
Froebel and Montessori and even like Steiner,
Yeah.
they had the boldness to love children, to
Mhm.
say children are divine. We have a responsibility. They are our life.
Mhm.
In times when children were disregarded or
Right.
children were told, weren't seen as lovely. They were seen as sinners,
Yes.
right? Sinners,
Or as
people that needed,
adults,
yes,
just
as a little
smaller
adult,
adults.
they were
And
working.
yes.
So I think about that sometimes and think about how that some of our ideas now, although that was the first step to loving children, some of our, like you said, it was the devil and the angel.
Mhm.
Like we still hanging on to this sort of spiritual,
Mhm.
ethereal view of this pure being coming into the world. So
Mhm.
then it's like, oh, this is the angelic, child, or uh-oh.
Yeah.
If they're not angelic, they're devilish.
Right, right. And I think that factors into conversations about when to talk to children about race or
Mhm.
um uh these other things that people get so uptight about, and they say, well, children are just pure, they don't see color, they're taught, no one's born hating somebody, they're taught whatever. They're fully human, they're noticing difference, and our
Yes.
job is to help them navigate the difference that they're seeing.
Yes.
And it comes sometimes that romanticized view is a crutch for us to
Yes.
not
Yes.
go more deeply into what's
Mhm.
happening.
Mhm. And I also think the romantics, like all those in the 17th, 18th century, they did that. So that pastoral feeling. So that we did get like the farm animals, the nature, the Montessori life skill materials, Waldorf watercolors and woodworking.
Hmm.
So there is also that aesthetic of childhood.
Yeah.
And I think that we put pressure on ourselves just from a visual perspective, even as carers and
Hmm.
teachers of young children, that there's so much good and beautiful pedagogy embedded in the prepared environment, in
Hmm.
the environment as a third teacher.
Yeah.
But again, if we fall into the romantic trap and we can't take the next step to really seeing children and letting children really be themselves and follow their own
Hmm.
direction, then we're not going to let them get messy.
Yeah.
And we're
Yeah.
not going to let our idea of what their environment looks like change according to the child's
Hmm.
autonomy and
Right.
direction.
Right.
So it's all
Or
just,
their right to take up space and
yes.
their right to be in a place that they can do things that they enjoy and need to do. I mean, the very first, well, the second childcare center I worked at, but the first one I wasn't at very long. So anyway, a center I worked at 30 years ago. It was in a church, and they didn't want we couldn't have anything in the space that couldn't be hidden on Wednesday and Friday, so that the
Mm,
Wednesday night church and the Sunday activities, people didn't have to deal with the idea that children were using the
yeah.
space. It was really
Yeah.
weird.
Yeah.
And that's like an extreme version, but I do think that there is this um, part of our discomfort with messiness or child-led anything is sort of having to come to terms with the idea that they're not all perfect, and
Mhm.
this job is hard and messy because humanity is messy and
Yeah.
children are humans, so they're messy.
Yeah. 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 I think the biggest one for that idealized view of childhood is that I think what you've said so many times on the show is that confusing the developmental with the moral issues.
Yeah. Thank you, Dan. I got that from
Yes,
Dan.
that's it. And how,
Um, Go ahead. I was just looking over some of the
no,
stuff you sent me.
no, just like I just remember again being a new teacher and being kind of shocked by some of the visceral emotions that children expressed and some of their ideas. And
Hmm.
I wasn't really at a place where I was saying kids were bad. I was saying I was bad
Mm,
because somehow I wasn't I was just exhausted because I wasn't keeping everyone happy all day.
Oh, yeah.
Like, this is supposed to be a happy place.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
And
sure.
it wasn't until someone said, well, no, it's okay. They can cry. They can, hitting and biting and all this stuff happens. We don't like it when it happens, but it happens. So let's use
Right.
that as, that whole Gartrell idea that it's
Yes.
mistaken behavior and that they're learning. It's an opportunity for social skills instead of trying to keep it out.
Right.
Keep it out and they'll keep it out, keep things
Yeah.
happy and flowing, and then you fall into an entertainment model as an educator. Just
Yeah.
keep everyone
Or
busy and distracted.
distraction for sure. Or we see when we fail to see the depth of children and their humanity. Um that's when we think I should just be able to tell you what to do and you will do it. You know what I mean? I should just be able to say, instead of letting you work out your conflict in play on your own because I trust you and trust development and trust play, we say, no, I have to be teaching that. And it's as simple as me telling you what to do differently because I don't acknowledge your true depth or understand what childhood is beyond this image of adorable children who hug me and make me feel good about myself.
Yeah. Yeah. But that makes me so excited to hear you say that, because that's knowing children. And
Yeah.
that's what bell hooks would say, like, is one of the key components of love is
Yeah.
knowledge, right?
Right.
So
I was looking for that quote. Yeah. Excuse me, everyone. Love is a combination of commitment, care, responsibility, trust, and respect,
yes,
is part of it. But,
yes. And knowledge, she says
and
knowledge too.
knowledge.
Knowledge is
Yeah.
love. And once you know a child, or know, oh, this I've seen 3-year-olds do this before.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I've seen 4-year-olds do this before.
Yeah.
It's not because they're bad,
Hmm.
it,
So how would you connect this to Malaguzzi's ideas on the image of the child and because I definitely think that's one of the disconnects and why doing true Reggio Emilia stuff won't work, doesn't always work in the United States. The
yeah,
other is our relationship with time, and other pressures about standards or whatever. But we have a cultural image of the child, as you said, of being sinful, even though um, that's one of the holdovers from
yes,
those early days,
yes.
of looking at children, is that well, they're just going to try and get away with whatever they can get away with, or
Mhm.
yeah, we have to be in control of it all. And so I'll let you answer my question.
I mean, I think that Malaguzzi was, he was looking at all the modern day people like Bruner and
Hmm.
Gardner, and I think that movement, all those progressive educators going back to Dewey, helped us shift from
Hmm.
that romantic, maybe also holding on to this idea of really loving children and recognizing that we love children in this way that we love humanity.
Hmm.
And not being on such an romantic extreme, but
Hmm.
sort of, I think of almost like normalizing the child in society,
Yeah.
right? That it doesn't have to be the child in welfare,
Hmm.
this poor, deprived child, and it doesn't have to be this beautiful angel from heaven, but the child is a person. And so I think
Hmm.
everything he said about the negotiated curriculum,
Hmm.
considering the child's questions, the child's theories, considering your response to the child constructing, like that whole
Hmm.
everything around constructivist, I
Hmm.
think helped us make the next step towards really seeing children and really loving children. And I don't think he would be happy with our interpretation in this country, with the image being the environment being beautiful.
Yes. Yeah,
No,
exactly. Just
yes,
having baskets
yes,
and
yeah.
and tidiness. Um, so I want to go back again and unpack a little bit what you mentioned at the beginning, and we moved away from pretty quickly. The distinction or the relationship between love and care in
Mm-hmm.
this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because one of the first things I thought when you said that is that maybe it's care and maybe it's not love, is that
Mm-hmm.
care is more easily gendered
Yeah.
than love. You know,
Yeah.
the work of care
Mhm.
um is sort of interpreted as, well, it should come naturally to women, and if
Yes.
men do it, we should celebrate them a little bit extra. But love, we kind of, I don't feel like it has that gendered,
Mhm.
that automatic gender uh attachment. So I don't know, what do you think about?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you read the Romantics, there is so much about maternal love,
Hmm.
right? And there is so much, it's interesting because there's so much about sort of the child-mother relationship. And
Hmm.
and I do think that's another reason why once we moved into the 19th century and we were saying, hey, we're professionals, we had to reject some of the love, right?
Hmm.
Because
Yeah.
it was associated with women being loving and women being caring.
Hmm.
So I think that
And because you're a woman, it's natural and it's not hard work.
right, it's natural instead of
Yeah.
it caring can be professional. It can
Hmm.
be there's a body of knowledge that we can
Right.
learn to care better, and that loving can be the same, I think. And
Hmm.
that's what we're grappling with now is like, can we love every child? Does every child have a right to be loved? Is it too much to ask of us?
Hmm.
If we redefine love as, this key component of early childhood, of
Hmm.
growing up in a healthy relationship with yourself, is knowing that how to love and knowing that you are lovable.
Hmm.
And then as early childhood educators, how can we professionalize that by thinking about how do we know the child? How do we respect the child? How do we trust the child? How do
Hmm.
we care for the child? So I
Yeah.
think when I say care and love are different, I see what you're saying about it's gendered, but I was thinking more like care can be uncaring, you
Hmm.
know,
Yeah.
care. We have to care for kids. If we feed them, it can be uncaring the way we feed them. It can be
Hmm.
uncaring the way we bathe them. But through care, they can learn to love
Right.
themselves and learn that they are loved if care is done in a loving way.
Right. Right.
But I do think that maternal, like we are not surrogate parents.
Hmm.
And that's what a lot of the new theorists are saying is there is a way to talk about our role because once we were swinging back towards sort of a romantic era with attachment parenting, but it
Mm.
was kind of like the whole bonding and attachment literature was almost like making people feel like the mother is it. The mother
Right.
is the natural caregiver. The baby has to be with, and there's a guilt thing about. So I think Malaguzzi was saying, no, it's children can be cared for by many people. Children
Hmm.
can be loved and educated by many people. We
Yeah.
can create a community
Right.
that cares, and there shouldn't be this guilt associated. So it shouldn't be gendered,
Hmm.
and it can be professional,
Hmm.
and and there are so many societies where children are secure as babies with
Hmm.
several adults,
Yeah.
that it's not just a natural womanly thing to love children and to be a
Hmm.
childhood educator.
Yeah.
Kind of talk
I I can't remember the name of the book or the author. Oh, the book is called The Evolved Nest, and the author
about.
is Darsha somebody.
Mm.
But essentially she is looking at um the way young animals are raised and nurtured in their life. And one of the chapters that was really powerful was the one about elephants and the idea of
Mm.
the allo mother, that
Oh,
there's so many people in the herd who are
oh, right.
helping
I did read.
with
Yeah.
this baby. And it continues, and it's just seen as a natural way to, I suppose it's sort of a iteration of it takes a village to raise a child. And I know that was sort of controversial when that idea in that book was first introduced, and it was seen as
Mhm.
socialism and
Mhm.
not just this idea that
I
there could
know.
be a community of people who care for a child, and it doesn't
Yes.
take anything away from the actual parents or whatever, but there can be this community. um when I moved to Indiana, Josie was a baby, Curtis was 2, no, almost 3. Um, and we had lived the whole of Curtis's life in Grandma and Grandpa's basement apartment, and
Mhm.
having aunts and uncles and grown cousins all over. And then we came to Indiana and we had nobody. We didn't know anybody. There was no family. And I started to think about, at that point, childcare as being kind of the new idea of the extended family. If you're
Yeah.
not comfortable with, we're certainly not taking a parent's place,
Yes.
but we're sort of still providing a lot of things that, had I stayed in Kearney, Nebraska, that extended family would have been able to
Yeah.
provide for me and for Josie and Curtis.
Yes. I love it's exciting that Jules Page has
Yeah.
done that work on that triangle of love,
Hmm.
right? And this idea that we're not surrogate parents, that parents aren't jealous when we love their kids.
Yeah.
The parents love having someone else loving their kids.
Yeah.
Um, that's powerful, I think.
Yeah, for
Another
sure.
way to view our profession.
So, you're more familiar, you've gone more deeply into Jules Page's work than I have. I've read an article or two and follow her on social media. But what do you know of her work on professional love that could contribute to this conversation? Because I think part of our professional drive as early childhood people to be seen as doing real work and to
Mhm.
be seen as intellectual and professional, has been to move more towards the clinical, I
Yes.
think sometimes, and to
Yeah.
feel ashamed of talking or thinking about love, or to
Yes.
get annoyed if a staff says they love a kid or whatever. No, you couldn't possibly love that child.
Mhm.
Or to worry about it not seeming professional. So what can Dr. Page help us with here?
I think she says a lot about becoming a reflective practitioner, like
Hmm.
how is your awareness of your emotions, whatever you're feeling, love, tenderness, anger, frustration, that is something we need to sort of grapple with and name in our profession,
Hmm.
that this work is very emotional and intimate. So it's almost like we keep saying as a profession, we are separate from the rest. Like 0 to 5 needs to be its own profession. It's a
Hmm.
unique time of life. We need to stop striving to be ready for kindergarten, for second
Yeah.
grade. We need to look down to the baby and understand life in a very different way. And I
Hmm.
think by actually talking about love, she says it helps us claim our identity as a different kind of educator, as a different kind of professional,
Hmm.
because we're designing our approach specifically for the baby brain or the 2-year-old brain or the 3-year-old brain, and that what's required of us is a little different,
Hmm.
you know?
Hmm.
So rather than, she does address like all the reasons we reject love and why it hasn't been legitimized, is all the stuff you've already said about
Hmm.
this whole romantic notion, and we want to be seen as
Yeah.
scientific, or the woman not being the natural mother,
Hmm.
we're rejecting all those parts of ourselves. And I think even as we start to talk about it, we trip on our own words,
Yeah.
because we're not really used to really putting ourselves, our own self-awareness in such a place of importance in our work.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, I was so I'm teaching a child development class this semester, and we're getting ready to talk about infant physical development later tonight, in fact. So I was reading that and thinking about that, and thinking about the idea that, earlier is better, so we need to focus on, we prop them sitting up and we put them in the walkers and we hold them up before they're ready, and um instead of just loving and having that understanding of, the kind of freedom to explore that will strengthen the muscles that get them to eventually those motor milestones that we're looking for. um and I think it's the same thing with the school readiness pressures. We
mhm.
feel like we can't be warm and loving and human because we have these goals, and these goals tend to make us want to look like institutions rather than, just uh, warm, nurturing places for children
Yeah,
who are 5 years old or younger.
yeah, yeah. And
which
I
is
think,
a weird I'll say juxtaposition. It's not the word I want, but to also this romanticized idea.
Mhm.
They're beautiful spiritual angels who deserve the best, but also that they need to fall in line.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I have to be cold to get them to fall in
Mhm.
line, or I have to be
Mhm.
stern or whatever.
Mhm. I know. I know.
There's
Yeah.
a oh, go ahead.
No.
There's a guy that I found on TikTok, and I can't remember his name now, but if I remember, I'll put it in when this posts. But he's not even an early childhood guy. He's a comedian, and he makes videos while he's doing dishes and just talks about things he's learning or thinking about. And a week or so ago, I found a video of his that he did talking about this stuff he had just learned about babies crying and people thinking that you should not respond to babies who are crying because they're manipulative and they'll just learn to be further manipulative. And he just thinks that's ridiculous. You know, these evil babies trying to win. He's like, they barely have object permanence.
I know.
They
I
aren't full
know.
scale manipulators. Um, uh, and he got so much flack, like comment after comment of how it's obvious he doesn't have a child and children can fake cry and babies can absolutely cognitively manipulate you. And I just, okay, so what is it? Do we think infants are angelic spiritual creatures, or do we think they're evil manipulators? we have to we have to make up our mind about something, right? Or at least consciously, explicitly think it through.
Yeah.
What our actions and our statements are saying we really truly believe about children.
Yes. And having respect for that, the culture of childhood, that it is
Yeah.
separate from being a student.
Yeah.
That is part of our love for children, is just knowing that they need to be playing, and they need to be held, and they need
Yeah.
to be messy, and I think that
And we
like
don't
you were
need to
talking
call them
about,
students.
that's what I'm saying. Exactly. That's what I'm
It's one
saying.
of
It's
my
like
pet
this
peeves.
idea about the little student is not
Uh-huh.
really helping us love children, because
Yeah.
we only think it's cute that they are the baby's holding the book, or
Yes.
3-year-olds, got the little glasses on and it looks like a little librarian or something. It's
Yeah.
like we think it's cute because it's this idea of who they will be. It's not
Yeah.
loving the
Yeah.
child. And
Yeah.
that's damaging our image and our love for children too.
Yeah. I had to look on TikTok. His name is Dan Donahue,
Oh, I'll have to look for him.
Donohue. I'll send you a couple of videos, Carol,
Okay.
but if anyone else
Yeah.
wants to look at him, he does a really good job of calling out the ridiculous idea that we should do anything but respond caringly to a baby.
Yeah, I know. And that pressure that we have to educate them.
Hmm.
I often think, like, all the research that's been done, like, just the thing that is kind of unspoken and unsaid is how much healthier the child is going to be when they are cared for,
Yeah.
when the parents not under financial stress and the whole,
Yeah.
lifestyle
Yeah.
stress, working, and I can't afford childcare, and I need to get them ready, and I can't pay the bills, and you know if we just cared for children,
Hmm. Yeah.
home life would be so much more peaceful and
Yeah.
loving, and probably their brains would be so much healthier,
Hmm.
and we would all
Yeah.
be relieved of this pressure to be, teaching.
Hmm. Because
And
there are sort of brain development neuroscientific implications when we care and love.
mhm,
That if we're really concerned about a child's future academic success or life success, can contribute to that or take away from that.
yes, but and we found that like in the 90s, and then
Hmm.
that, like, yes, the neurodevelopment is linked to care and love, but we didn't call it care and love. We
Hmm.
called it like relationships
Attachment or
and
relation.
attachment
Yeah.
and social emotional skills,
Yeah.
and it's like, but we just couldn't say care and love. So then it
Right.
became like the little scholar again, because we're
Yes.
teaching social emotional skills.
Yeah. Yeah. And I hadn't really thought about that because I use relationship-based care a lot,
Which
and I
is
use
good. It is,
it.
right?
And yeah, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but to think of it as sort of a euphemism for talking about love
Yeah.
is interesting to me. that
Right?
if I said, you know what young children really need from their early childhood experience or program or setting or provider is love, I would get more pushback than if I said relationship-based care is really
Exactly.
important at this
Yes.
age.
Responsive care,
Responsive
relationship-based
care.
care, it
Right.
is like love
Yeah.
and care is embedded
Yeah.
in that approach and that philosophy and all that good stuff we have from responsive caregiving, but we're still afraid to say love and care.
Yeah.
And for good reason, because
Yeah.
of the associations and but I just think we're getting better at defining what
Yeah.
it is so that it's not
Or we'll
romantic.
talk about how we love children kind of globally, but when we're one-on-one or individually with them in real life work, we're less comfortable saying,
Yes.
I want to work on loving these children. I
Yes.
want to show love to these children.
I mean, and a lot of Jules Page's work is a lot of interviews,
Yeah.
of educators and caregivers and families. And so like sometimes when I read her research, it sparked memories for me. Like I think I wrote about, one of the memories of like crying at the end of the year because my kids were leaving and, someone told me I was too attached. But I
Yeah.
have another one where I quit a job and I was really young and I must have been like, in my 20s and I was a
Mhm.
college student, but the kids, I love those kids, but it was a kind of a desperate kind of situation where it was kind of a crummy daycare and
Yeah.
we just like they were clinging to me. I felt like the
Yeah.
kids were like, oh, there's someone who loves us and
Yes.
we gotta it was hard.
Yeah.
I just like I remember being confused by that,
Yeah.
as a young
Yeah.
person.
And
Because
I
I
mean,
was like, I love them, I'm leaving them, I feel guilty because when I'm not
yeah.
here but am I supposed to love them? But
Yeah.
now like there's a little fiery feeling of advocacy, like this is
Hmm.
right and I want what's right for them. But you're so young and you don't know where to put that, all
Yeah.
those caring, loving feelings
Yeah.
and how
Yeah.
it
I had
profession.
an experience working in a center that I didn't want to be working at, frankly, because of
Mhm.
the culture and the practices. And I was with 1-year-olds, and they all 10 of them would be wherever I was. And if I left, they would cry, and instead of the adults around me thinking, what what has Heather done with these children to create this connection, this loving relationship? It was, well, Heather's, spoils them and doesn't have boundaries, and um that's why we don't want to get too attached, because they'll cry if you have to pee and all that stuff. I was like, what a really cold way of
I had
thinking
the
about
same. That's
your
exactly.
work.
I was just remembering that, and I was writing almost the exact same thing
Yeah.
about that feeling of having the kids clinging to me and feeling responsible for them,
Yeah.
and loving them, and not knowing what really loving someone else's child was because I was young. But then having the other educators sort of roll their eyes at me and be like,
Hmm.
"Oh, here's
Yeah.
Carol again." Like
Yeah.
all the kids got to sit on Carol's lap.
Yeah.
I feel guilty. Like I guess I'm not being professional, or
Exactly.
I'm
Yeah.
confused, like this, I just, but then that's what I mean by reading like other people's account of
Uh-huh.
talking about these things that we haven't been able to talk about,
Yeah.
helps you sort it out and helps you realize, oh, when you care for children, when you feel responsible for children, when you get to know children, you love them. That's what love
Yeah.
is. And
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah.
And that's good.
Yeah. So I think this is going to be one of those episodes where people email me and say, on episode 312, you talked about this author, and I won't remember who it is. So but Jules Page, I want to make sure I make that clear. It's JoolsPage. Jules Page has a lot of good work around the idea of professional love.
And she's been researching it for quite a long time. I didn't know about her. I started to find little things when I was writing Illuminating Care, and
Yeah, I think that's
afraid.
Illuminating
I
Care is
was
probably where I learned about her, but
I
she's
was
been
afraid
doing
to
it.
talk about love. I was like, I'm not
Mhm.
going to love. I'm just going to stick on care.
Yeah.
So after, yeah. So yeah, she's, I think, and Suzanne Axelson really highlighted her for me too. She said,
Oh
oh,
yeah.
look at this,
Uh-huh.
Facebook, like sending me links and things
Yeah.
because she's been talking about this stuff for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. I know I used to follow her on Twitter. But I'm not on Twitter much anymore, so I don't know if anybody's still there, but she's out there to be found if people want more more of
Yes.
her ideas
Yes.
and thoughts and research.
Yeah.
What else? Was there anything else that we haven't talked about that you really want to hit?
I don't
I'm
think so.
sort of,
I just think we have to challenge that romantic view of love, and
yeah,
we don't have to discredit it, because yeah, we all get that melting heart. We
yeah,
all, it's important that we love kids
yeah,
from that standpoint too, but how does the romantic view of childhood limit us seeing the whole child?
yeah.
How does it limit our commitment to all children?
Hmm.
How does it like you said, cause us to internalize shame or reflect shame on
Yeah,
children just for being human?
yeah. So a question just popped into my mind. What that I can imagine someone listening sort of thinking, what do we do if there's, because also in this conversation, we're working with young children, there are some that it's going to be really easy to feel that kind of love and connection with, and some that aren't. Same with relationship-based care. If we were calling it that, it would be the same conversation. But what
Yeah.
kinds of things do we do when we realize we're having difficulty with this
Yeah.
one child or a couple of children in our group?
Yeah. I think I think we have to have a place to talk about our feelings, whether it's
Hmm.
in our journal or whether it's a beloved colleague or friend,
Yeah.
we have to have a place to say, man, I need a break.
Yeah.
This is hard.
Yeah.
And then maybe we can re recalibrate that emotion, like our emotional life is a really important part of our profession in this,
Uh-huh.
where we love kids. But go back to that definition of love, of just knowing children. Like,
Hmm.
how can I step back from this child?
Hmm.
How can I untangle myself from the child and be curious?
Right.
And be curious to know this child. How can I show trust in this child? Put the love on the shelf, because I
Hmm.
don't feel the love right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
how can I care for this child respectfully? Take those elements of love that we're using to build a professional love, like Joel Page says, like,
Yeah.
how do I care? How do I know? How do I trust?
Yeah. Because
But
one
don't.
thing that I have said is, I mean, until recently, you don't have to like every child, but no one should be able to tell which ones which ones it's hard for you to like or love.
Mhm.
I hadn't thought in that, because it's a nice little soundbite, but I hadn't thought about the necessity to work through those emotions yourself. So of course the things you're describing, whether it's journaling or finding that trusted coworker that you can have, not oh my God, I hate this kid, venting, pile on, but like I'm really struggling. Here's what I feel when this child wipes his boogers on me or hits another child or whatever those kind of unlovable characteristic might be. So I have to add that into my
Yeah.
my
I
my
think this whole,
conversation now.
like I'm thinking of a child last year that was really difficult, and I just kept coming back to, like, I was observing him and I was helping someone else observe him, and I
Hmm.
was pointing out to the observer, notice how the teachers have not called his name. It's cleanup time. The
Uh-huh.
teachers have not called his name, because he's kind of losing it and he's all over the place. So, but they have strategies. Notice how the teacher put her hand on his shoulder.
Uh-huh.
The teacher whispered in his ear that he can be the one to clean the paintbrushes.
Uh-huh.
No, so I was pointing out to this other person, there are a lot of strategies in place to help this child be successful. This is a really difficult child
Hmm.
who's kind of, there's been some days when these teachers have been ready to pull their hair out,
Hmm.
right? But early childhood educators usually aren't supported, right?
Yeah.
Don't have strategies. We don't have ways to separate ourselves. We don't have someone coming in to observe, to help us figure out all that we're doing to help the
Hmm.
child be, or getting an evaluation. Like, if you have someone else kind of holding up the child with you and saying, what, this child deserves to be
Yeah.
lovable. And it's
Yeah.
not easy, right? But I think the reason we sometimes feel that we don't love children is because we don't feel supported. We don't feel
Hmm.
loved. We don't
Yeah.
feel like
Well,
anywhere.
or we don't have that permission to have anything in our space that looks chaotic or out of control. Um, so all of those little things that inevitably happen with young children, especially in group life, um, instead of being curious about it, we feel like we just need to stop and fix it.
Yeah.
And it's the curiosity that will help us find a connecting point
Yes.
with that child, um, or to at least not see them through this lens of pressure and frustration.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. We have to support our early childhood people.
Yeah.
And this, I think sometimes there's this radical acceptance and zero expulsion,
Mm-hmm.
talk, and we all want that. We don't want
Mm-hmm.
any child to be expelled, but in the absence of support,
Mm-hmm.
that work falls on often under-resourced people.
Yeah, for sure.
But so it's sometimes such a gigantic gulf
Yeah.
between what we want to be as a profession and where we are, and the kind of supports and strategies and
Mm-hmm.
networks that early childhood educators need to love children.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Lisa Murphy and I are reading this book called No Longer Welcome, that's about
Oh,
suspension and expulsion, that we're going to record about as soon as
oh,
Lisa
good.
finishes it. But it's been really uh, helpful as
Yes.
to present kind of all the sides of that decision, or that possibility.
Yeah.
Um, okay. I think we probably should end the
Yeah. Yeah, I
conversation.
think we're good.
We've
Thank
been
you,
going for a
everyone.
while. I keep looking at all this stuff you sent me and feeling like we
No, I
didn't
think
hit
we
it all,
covered
but
no, I feel like we
yeah,
did. We talked,
yeah,
it helps me think out loud.
yeah, yeah. I think for me too, it's helpful. I find myself even as I talk about being curious, thinking in very well, of course we love children. If you don't love children, there's a problem. That binary, instead
Mhm.
of thinking about all this nuance. So it's helpful for me too to kind of lay it all out there.
I was talking to my son about it, who he's 20 now, and he said something like, "Isn't that just too much to expect of people to love all children?" And which I thought was such a good question,
Yeah.
but because it got me rolling again, and then I went back to that, like, I hope that our way of defining love and viewing love in a supportive network where early childhood educators feel like they have support,
Hmm.
I hope that our view can be more liberating. I
Right.
hope it's not another thing. Okay, now we have to love everyone.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
want us to teach them, but now you want us to love it. That it
Yeah.
can be
You
like
need
a
to document every
reciprocal.
loving thing you do.
Exactly. I hope it can be a reciprocal,
Yeah.
regenerative, liberating force. I
Yeah.
think I believe it is, but I understand how people shouldn't be hard on themselves because we're humans, and
Uh-huh.
yeah, and we need to acknowledge our struggles, and we have the right as educators to have those networks to
Hmm.
help us define love
Right.
in ways that
Yeah.
children can all experience being lovable and being loved and learning how to love.
Yeah, that's a nice way to put it. Yeah. Well, um, now I wish I had a real classroom to go to tomorrow and love on
Uh,
some children, but I'll just love on my college students later
you can do
today.
that. They need it.
They also need it. Yeah.
They really need it.
All right. Thank you, Carol,
Thank
for this
you so much,
conversation.
Heather.
Good to talk
Take
to you
care.
always. And thanks everybody for listening to another episode of That Early Childhood Nerd.